Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, live today on June the 24th to bring you guys another week of storylines around the NFL, kicking it off with the 18-game regular season, talking more about it, this time getting some players' input about it. Some don't really mind it, some feel very strongly against it, so we're going to get into that. Then also some gradings on the offseason so far in the NFL, starting off with the NFC North. We're going to go through all four teams and grade their offseasons up until this point because we are getting more into the thick of things, so we're going to go through that. And also the Carolina Panthers. Adam Thielen already noticing a difference in Bryce Young now heading into training camp in his second year. What big changes can we expect? And maybe what was the reason for such a struggling first year for Bryce Young? That and much more on today's show. As a reminder, if you guys have any questions or comments you want to make, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using this link, I'm able to see your question or comment, and that way I can acknowledge it, get your guys' perspective on anything I say or any of the topics today, and that way we can keep the conversation going. It's a massive help for the program and the entire network, so if you would, please use that tip and donations link you see on your screen, gsmcpodcast.net. But without further ado, we will start off on that topic that I just mentioned, the NFL players. More players talking about this 18-game regular season. Recently, ESPN surveyed players from multiple teams for their opinions on adding an extra game to the regular season and having probably the Super Bowl pushed back to President's Day weekend with that extra bye week also included there. Before we talked about Ryan Kelly and him giving his opinion, a very strong opinion against adding another game to the regular season, but now we got some more players giving their input on it. Some felt indifferent about it, and some, like Ryan Kelly, felt very strongly on it. Some players that felt, in favor of it, you could say, or indifferent about it, were Pittsburgh Steelers' Damontae Kazee. He made some pretty good points. He said that he wouldn't complain already as a veteran player in the NFL, acknowledging the fact that a honest reality with what he pointed out, that as a veteran, he has seen mostly that the NFL ends up getting their way in the end, and it does usually fall to the fact that the NFL, if they really want something bad, they'll go to all lengths to end up achieving what they want in the end. So as a veteran, he sort of has acknowledged that, and keeping it real with anybody that asked the question as the interviewer, that's where he stood on it. You just have to adjust as a veteran. He also said it's another week, to potentially get paid, receive another game check, and feed your family in that instance, which you can't really blame him for. You can't blame anybody for having that sort of mindset. Then you look at Carolina Panthers tight end Tommy Tremble, and he was another player that was okay with it. He said as long as the pay aligns with adding another week of work, hopefully it's all for the best interest of the NFL and the players in his opinion. But again, he's another one that didn't feel too strongly about it, almost accepting the fact already that it could be a reality in the near future. And also one of his teammates, linebacker Josie Jewell, another game means more money, no problem with it, just plain and simple, just getting more compensation for another week. He's all right with it. He sees no problem with it. And some results from that ESPN survey came out as 46% in favor of the 18-game regular season, but with stipulations like more pay and something along the lines of that, probably more benefits, more health benefits, or just more security in their contracts with adding another game. 46% were in favor of that with some added stipulations. 8% also were in favor, but without stipulations. So not really feeling too strongly about it. If it happens, it happens. They would go along with it. Then you had 19% of the players that were surveyed that were completely against the 18-game regular season. And that's where we go into one of the strongest members of that 19% in Pittsburgh Steelers, Deshaun Elliott. New to the Steelers, played last year with the Miami Dolphins as a safety, and now he got a chance to talk about it. I mentioned his teammate Damontae Kazee being interviewed about the 18-game regular season, and you had Deshaun Elliott sort of interject and just have comments in the background while Damontae Kazee was being interviewed. And then clearly the media transitioned over to him, and he got his thoughts out there in the air, to which he said, "They're not paying us enough money already. They're stingy with their money, so they want to make us play 18 games. As a player union, we should get way more than what we're getting right now, and not just the top guys either." He also added that they actually don't have to go out there and put their bodies on the line and put their bodies at risk, meaning the owners, the NFL, anyone that's thinking about adding an 18-game regular season. He says they don't really get it because they're not the ones actually out there, so it's easy, obviously, to make those decisions when you don't have to wake up the next morning and feeling sore from your feet all the way up to your shoulders, potentially. So that's another good point. It's one that just keeps coming up over and over from the players, because it is a very valid point, and it makes sense, obviously, and it is a serious health concern if you're playing maybe too many weeks, and how does that impact you in the long run. And that's sort of where more of these players were being pushed to making their reasons out to, with Pittsburgh Steelers also. Their guard, James Daniels, brought up the fact that plain and simple, that if it was about player safety, like the NFLPA likes to bring up, like the NFL likes to make a big deal out of when they make all these new rules, they don't want too much contact in the offseason. They take away the hip drop tackle. They want to make it about player safety, but in James Daniels' mind, he said if they were worried about player safety, it would take away games rather than adding on more games. So it really doesn't come down to player safety, it just comes down to money. So that was pretty plain and simple as well. And another fellow offensive lineman, Dion Dawkins from the Buffalo Bills, also brought up a interesting point that I thought I haven't seen yet, and that is very true, and it makes a lot of sense that players now, with adding more of a workload onto it and maybe a shorter offseason and how they restructured, that is all yet to be ironed out. But by adding another week, it sort of gives players not enough time to grow themselves outside of the game of football, because they now add more meaningful games. Now you have the playoffs also on top of that, and by the time that ends, it's February. And then if they don't restructure the offseason, you're already getting back in the swing of things by maybe April, mid-April, late April. So you don't really get enough time to venture out in other career paths. That is important, obviously, because if you add another game, it could shorten the careers of some players, especially those that get hit on every play. And then at that point, if you don't have enough time to grow yourself outside of the game of football in the limited free time that you have, outside of that, what are you going to do once the playing days are over? You know what I mean? It's like you get done with it, and then you're sort of left just looking around, not really knowing what to do, not really having an avenue to go down, because you don't have that much time outside of the game of football, basically to stay relevant in a way. Of course, most players go to broadcasting, go to media, but if you don't really have too much experience in that while you're playing, like you're starting to see more players do, it could be a little bit intimidating jumping over to that, giving your thoughts on everything like that. So that's another point that Dion Dawkins brought up that I thought I haven't heard of. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, another fellow Steeler, gave his thoughts, and he said that 17 games seems to be more than enough. He doesn't understand why they're trying to add another game, and that taking away a preseason game won't really matter, because the guys that would play in there or that would be available to play wouldn't be playing anyway. Like the main guys wouldn't be playing in those preseason games anyway, so it doesn't really do too much for them, at least, to take the game away. Then you even have some owners, I brought it up before in a previous episode, New York Giants owner John Mara is one of the owners not too sure about adding another game because he's worried about the player fatigue and the wear and tear, and that sort of goes along the lines of the quality that's put out there, because now, with more facts, more player input that we have now, it brings up the point, going off of what John Mara said and really worrying about the wear and tear. It goes down the road of the quality of games that you see, and really with the limited preparation, if you take away another preseason game, that leaves you with about 2, and how many of the real starters, the number 1 quarterbacks, the wide receivers, the number 1 running backs, how many are going to really be out there for both games? Probably not that many. So then that means you have 1 preseason game to run through everything, a real life rehearsal, a real life run through of the actual game. If you limit that to 1 during the offseason, then how is that going to look when the real games start in week 1, week 2, when you don't have that much preparation leading up to it? Yeah, of course you have training camp and mini camp and all that sort of stuff still, but when you only have 1 real rehearsal of what the actual performance is going to look like, it might end up looking like preseason games in week 1 through probably 3, week 1 through 2 of the actual regular season. And is that a good product that the NFL wants to put out there just because they want to take away one more preseason game and want to throw out there another regular season game? Is it going to look like a regular season game at the end of the day? So that's something that they have to take into consideration. Another change like this would probably, because it is so important and monumental, it would require most likely a new CBA agreement, a whole new CBA, which they just recently agreed on this one in 2020. So whole new CBA, and that's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of back and forth and a lot of compromise, honestly, from both sides. And with that compromise comes the biggest topic of the revenue split. None of these players are going to agree to an 18-game regular season if they don't have a greater chunk of the pie to sort of distribute among all players, not just the top guys like Deshaun Elliott said. Some of the guys that aren't in the top 3% of the highest earning contracts, they also want to receive more pay because they're also going to be out there playing, obviously. So how they distribute that throughout the entire NFL, not just the top contracts, will be a massive point. And just the last point on here, with how they restructured the offseason, I've said it before, without the OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and the preseason especially, you're only really hurting the younger players and how much they contribute to their teams right away. So if the NFL doesn't value that too much, they're going to go through with this anyway, unless they find another alternative to still have those, and maybe just making it mandatory for the younger players, making it mandatory for them to still have rookie minicamp, to still have OTAs, mandatory minicamp, making that all a must for rookies, I think could be a solution to this, but it isn't a situation where the veterans have to go to this if they feel that they don't have enough off time already. So maybe that's another alternative to change this, because the offseason and how they structure it will be important, because it will only hurt the younger players, and that's not fair to them if they get their time to prepare taken away because it just doesn't fit the veterans because they're already comfortable. You got to find a happy medium there to make everyone happy, and that's why this isn't so easy, obviously. Players can say one thing, the NFL can say another thing, but it's going to take a long time for this to really be settled on something that makes everybody happy at least, or somewhat close to content, all right, with this situation. No one's actually really happy when a whole new CBA is made, but that's the reality of it. That's where it stands, how the NFL players, some of them, are feeling about it, and I would love to know what you guys think about it. Another game being added. It sounds great for us fans, but from a player perspective, let me know what you guys think on another game being added. And with that being said, we're going to go to a quick break, and when we return, a lot more to talk about, starting off with ranking, or grading, actually, I should say, the off-seasons in the NFC North, grading how well the Packers, Bears, Vikings, and the Detroit Lions all did this offseason now that we're ramping it up a little bit more heading into training camp. You're not going to want to miss that, so stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Everybody is the fakest, I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant, I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some loose shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world?
The show, and now jumping into another mini-series, I guess you can call it, of grading the offseason so far in the NFL. Starting off with the NFC North, going through some of the biggest moves that they made, including the draft, free agent signings, any trades, and re-signing some of their major players, all of that is going to be taken into account in these rankings. And unfortunately, I don't have the graphics as a preface to this segment. I know I usually have the graphics, but it wasn't working for me leading up to the episode, so I do apologize for that. I will try to get those back on here tomorrow. So for right now, we're just going to have to talk about it, and we're going to get started with the Green Bay Packers being the first team on here. A grade that I wanted to give them, for me, a C+. A C+ because I didn't see too much movement, too much adding, and that could be a good thing for some people, but with a young team, surprising a lot of people last year and how good they were, and a lot of people are expecting Jordan Love to take that next step, and I would probably fall in that category as well. But where I'm, sort of lacking behind and not really being too convinced by the Packers as of yet is when you make that transition from being, that surprise team, that young team that nobody expects, once you jump into that second year, and now more people have film on you, now more people know what you're about, and you don't make too many changes that really move the needle, you could struggle in that second season, and that's where you see that dump off or that downgrade potentially from rookies, most likely heading into their second year if they don't live up to expectations. That's usually where you see that, and I know they added Xavier McKinney in free agency to sort of replace Darnell Savage. You had Josh Jacobs signing him to a 4-year, $48 million deal, replacing Aaron Jones essentially. You get younger at that position, but I would like to see a bit more consistency from Josh Jacobs because his first 2 years, very solid, over 1,000 yards as a rusher, but the last 4 years he's had only 1 year of 1,000 yards, and that as a running back, as your number one guy, of course you'd want to most likely split carries with the kind of personnel that the Packers now have available to them, but as that lead guy, especially if you're going to pay him $12 million, you have to see a little bit more consistency, and that just comes down to really staying healthy and producing as that number one back. I think he has improved in situations, so it is looking up for him, but I want to see it now in live games. Elsewhere in free agency and in this offseason, they lost a starting offensive lineman in John Runyon, so that's going to be a hole that they have to fix. They drafted Arizona tackle Jordan Morgan in the first round, which was questionable. I saw a lot of reactions from Packers fans that weren't too happy with it, so I don't know too much about him, but I know I didn't really see him too often in first round mocks, or just didn't know too much about him in the category of offensive tackle. You knew about the Tyler Guytons, about the Troy Falutanus, and those kind of players. The tackle from Penn State as well, I can't remember his name, but Jordan Morgan didn't really pop up in that, so it makes me think that they reached for him a little bit, and how that turns out in such a crucial position, if he is in contention to start, will be something to watch. And the biggest thing for them, the Jordan Love extension, up until this point, you could look at it as pretty decent if that's the only thing that they have left to worry about, and if that is the only major contract that they're going to have on their books, this could be a very good situation for them. But because they haven't done it yet, because it's sort of being pushed off a little bit towards training camp, I'm not left too satisfied. That's why I wanted to give them a C+. It seems a little bit harsh, but I would have liked to have seen them add a little bit more to this team, especially on the offensive line, because that is a major part to all of this, obviously. And I still think they're going to be pretty competitive, but for right now, they get a C+ in my grading. Then we're going to move on to the Chicago Bears, and they fell to an A- to me. An A- for the Chicago Bears because even though it might seem a little over-dependent on Caleb Williams, they did a lot. They did a lot to just clean house, get everything that this new personnel didn't want in there. They took them out, and they brought in the guys they wanted, and they were very successful at doing that. So you talk about Caleb Williams, obviously he goes without saying. The franchise quarterback, the generational type of guy that you want in there to flip the organization on its head and really lead you into the next 10 years, hopefully. You drafted Rome Odunze with the number 9 overall pick to add to DJ Moore. Then you signed DeAndre Swift to kick off free agency and the offseason. $14 million guaranteed to Swift might scare a few people, but while I do think it's a little questionable, he is still an upgrade, I believe, from what you had last year, coming off of one of his better years, one of his healthier years in his career. I think that's still an upgrade, and you can't be too mad about it. I probably would have wanted cheaper, obviously, but if it's an upgrade, the way that this has been trending, I think it's still positive for the Chicago Bears. Then bringing in Keenan Allen, trading for him, giving up a 4th-round pick, I want to say, on an expiring deal heading into the final year of his contract in 2024. If it doesn't work out, you don't get your hands too dirty, and you could just say, we're good. Keenan, you can move on in free agency and sign somewhere else. But for right now, you almost get him as a 1-year rental to help out Caleb Williams in his first year. And then after that, if you truly value him, you could re-sign him. That's all well and fine. But if not, he could just move on, and he sort of did his part to help out the Chicago Bears. So a lot of low-risk moves that I really liked. And also to add on top of that, they re-signed probably their biggest free agent in Jalen Johnson. They franchise tagged him so he didn't hit the open market, and then they agreed to a long-term extension, which was fantastic because their defense is their more experienced and more developed part of their team with the offense and so many new pieces. They're going to rely on that defense, and having Jalen Johnson back is a major contributor to having a successful season on the defensive side of the ball. So that's something I'd really like to see. And like I mentioned, a lot of moves that they made were low risk and high reward sort of transactions that they had in the offseason. And that's what you need in this sort of time when you're trying to flip this organization into a contender. Not being afraid to fail and not being afraid to, call your shot, go after what you want is something I really liked this offseason from the Chicago Bears. So I was left really impressed. They get an A- from me. And then the second to last team here, the Detroit Lions, in win-now mode. No lollygagging about it. No funny business. They get a B- for me because they're in win-now mode. They're in no messing around. This is all business right now for the Detroit Lions. And I know making Jared Goff the second highest, or I guess maybe the third highest paid quarterback, however you determine that, in the NFL at $53 million per year, 4 years, $212 million as his total contract. Based on just him as a quarterback, is he overpaid? Probably, just based on what he produces. A lot of people will point to the fact that Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, should get most of the credit. That could be fair, that could be accurate, but my biggest point with, finding some validity in this contract for Jared Goff, and I was on the side that, it might be expensive, and I have been on the side of criticizing Trevor Lawrence for not producing just based on his production, earning that contract. I acknowledge that, but the difference here is with the Lions and Trevor Lawrence and how much these quarterbacks are getting paid. Yes, they're overpaid in terms of production, but it is different with the Lions because they're in win-now mode. This is their window to go to a Super Bowl, make some Super Bowl appearances, heck, maybe even win a Super Bowl. This is their time to do it right now. And if that means you have to pay a little bit extra for Jared Goff, you have to do it because you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Penei Sewell, you have Jahmyr Gibbs, you brought in David Montgomery, your offensive line is stacked, Aiden Hutchinson is a stud, Brian Branch is great, Jack Campbell, I think that's your linebacker's name, I hope I didn't butcher that. You have all these pieces in line to be a great team in the NFC. This is your window now. You have to have the quarterback in place to make this successful. You don't have time to waste trying to look for another quarterback, making this a distraction throughout the entire regular season if Jared Goff is just pouting about it, not happy about his contract situation. You have to get this out of the way to continue this great momentum that you have from last year. And that's different from the Jacksonville Jaguars because Trevor and the Jaguars haven't shown any inclination or any thought to anybody that this is their window to win now. Yeah, they've been pretty good in some moments. At the start of last year, they were great, but that sort of died down. And you saw really some of the flaws in this team, and Trevor Lawrence really didn't do too much to supersede that and make himself be placed in some conversations amongst some of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not saying Jared Goff did that, but as a team, the Lions, with him as a crucial piece to it, were able to have a lot of team success where the Jaguars didn't. So that's sort of where it differs with Trevor Lawrence. And elsewhere, they addressed the offensive line even more. They added Kevin Zeitler and Glasgow for their offensive line. They were able to re-sign Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I mentioned, and Penei Sewell. two cornerstone pieces. They're going to be on the team for the foreseeable future. And they addressed defensive back, which I thought was their major flaw in the first 2 rounds of the draft, drafting Terrion Arnold, adding Rakestraw, trading for Carlton Davis, trading for Carlton Davis from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you get 3 new cornerbacks in there already. And they brought in DJ Reader at the defensive tackle position, which is nice to sort of complement Aiden Hutchinson. But I would have liked to have seen them add another edge rusher there. Then they added Marcus Davenport, but we haven't seen too much from him. So outside of that, they did pretty much everything they were supposed to. And how it all pans out and how they put that on to fruition, I think that has earned them at least a B-, because I think I'm being fair there with the contract, because it is a lot. It is a lot for Jared Goff, so a B- is that the grade for the Detroit Lions, which means the last team we're going to talk about is the Minnesota Vikings, and they also received a B- for me, because they also went through a lot of change, but a lot of uncertainty with the health of some of their players that they did bring in. They were able to achieve the biggest part of business this offseason by re-signing Justin Jefferson, and all while it was expensive, obviously now being the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. You had to get it done. There's no way you could have had any thought about moving on from Justin Jefferson, and while it is expensive, it could have been even more expensive if they waited until the regular season or next offseason to do something. Getting him at $35 million, I guarantee in a year or two, will seem like a bargain, because I know some wide receiver out there is going to get more, whether it's CeeDee, whether it's somebody else coming down the line, Ayuk maybe, I don't know what some team will pay him, but these guys that need contract extensions, most likely CeeDee, they could get more, and if you think that they're better than Justin Jefferson, not a lot of people do, it'll look like a bargain in the near future. And they also brought in Aaron Jones to have an upgrade at that position, because Alexander Mattison wasn't giving you too much in terms of production on a low-risk 1-year deal at 29 years old. The biggest problem with Aaron Jones is his health, so how he keeps that in check and how healthy he stays will be a major part to all of this. They drafted J.J. McCarthy, obviously, to be their franchise quarterback. I think he'll start at some point this offseason, but they also brought in Sam Darnold as that much-needed bridge guy in case that J.J. isn't ready to start right off the bat. Then on the defensive side of the ball, where arguably they were the weakest, they added Jerry Tillery, they added Blake Cashman, Alex Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard to replace Daniil Hunter at that pass rusher position, and they drafted Dallas Turner as well to have a nice duo there on the outside. It's exciting, a lot of new pieces that I think are underrated to help out that defensive run defense, especially because that was a major point of theirs, major flaw. And they added a lot of defensive linemen, a lot of guys that are up in front trying to defend a run. I really liked what they did. I liked the additions, but again, staying healthy if you're Blake Cashman, if you're Aaron Jones, some of these guys that will have to play a major part, Jonathan Grenard as well, they're major pieces, so they have to stay healthy. That's why I can only really give them a B-. If there were no health concerns, they would probably be up to a B+ or a B at the minimum, but I'm still a little weary about it, and I also would have liked to have seen them address the cornerback, maybe safety position. So that's where the grades are. That's where they, top off there with the Minnesota Vikings. That's the entire NFC North. Let me know what you guys think of the grades. If I was a little bit too harsh, maybe with the Packers, maybe a little bit too lenient with the Chicago Bears. Leave your guys' thoughts in the comments during the video or afterwards as well. But we're going to head into another break, and when we return after that, we're going to talk some more about quarterback development, Adam Thielen, seeing some differences already in Bryce Young this year. Why is that a positive thing? What can we take from that? And what was the main reason Bryce Young struggled last year, in my opinion? I will give you guys all that information once we return in just a few seconds.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the show, and now jumping into the third segment on today's episode, we're going to talk some more about the Carolina Panthers and their quarterback Bryce Young. Another bad year in 2023 for Bryce, for the Panthers. Well, not for Bryce because it was his first year, but another bad year for the Panthers. Overall, not a good look for them. Finished 2-15, and the first overall pick in Bryce Young, they didn't do too much to really help him out and give him the opportunity really to go out there and perform as a typical number one pick would be expected to produce, but clearly he wasn't ready for the situation because the Panthers didn't do a well enough job to prepare him enough, really support him with a cast around him that could give him the best opportunity to be successful in 2023. And I'll touch on that more a little bit towards the end of the segment. But during the regular season in 2023, they fired their head coach, Frank Reich, and that obviously brings a lot more issues to a rookie quarterback trying to figure out his own thing, and now the leader of the entire team is out the door. So now who steps up, who continues the development of Bryce Young? That really hindered him in his first year, and now I believe it is looking a little bit brighter. They are getting better, and they have gotten better already at this point in the offseason, being heavily influenced by the offensive side of the ball because they hired their new head coach in Dave Canales from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The former offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers now is the head coach. So it is no surprise that they brought in a couple of offensive linemen. Deontay Johnson, they traded for him. They drafted Xavier Legette out of the University of South Carolina. They drafted Jonathan Brooks, who was arguably the best running back in this year's draft class. No secrets as to why they were so heavily influenced by the offense. They want to make sure that it all fits into Dave Canales' system, obviously, but also because Bryce needs help on that side of the ball. It is pivotal for Bryce and this team in the Carolina Panthers to help him out in any which way that they can, because as a rookie in 2023, you look at some of the numbers he posted, over 2,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, and again, a 2-15 record by the Carolina Panthers. It isn't obviously the greatest numbers for Bryce, but I feel like a lot of people that know him within the organization or just people that know him in general, I saw CJ Stroud talk about him pretty highly still, that he has all the confidence still in the world in Bryce. He is built for this, from his success in college, and it just feels like people know that he could be good, know that he could be successful. They're just waiting. Really, it seems like for the Panthers to support him with the right amount of people to give him at least a chance to do that. And one of the pieces that wasn't too much at fault last year for how well Bryce Young produced was Adam Thielen. And he was definitely the veteran in that group. He was their leading receiver throughout a major portion of that season for the Carolina Panthers. And obviously, it wasn't enough. I don't think anybody would have expected it to be enough. Nobody would have dreamed that Adam Thielen had that run during, I forget what weeks it was. It was probably week 6, week 5 maybe through week 9 or 10. Something like that in the middle of the season where Adam Thielen was, I think, averaging over 90 yards, at least 6 or 7 receptions. Something crazy like that for a receiver his age to be leading this team. It shouldn't happen, but it did. I was very happy he was on my fantasy team, but regardless of that, it really didn't do too much to move the needle. That's why you can't really have that as the circumstance for Bryce Young. And Adam Thielen already this year has felt that he sees a difference in Bryce Young already throughout the building and how he carries himself by saying, you can tell Bryce's demeanor in the building. He's just more comfortable, right? And you don't really realize it when you start getting to be a veteran guy, but just because you forget about those times. Thielen also noticed the urgency the confidence and the comfortability in the system that they're implementing this year under Dave Canales, which can only be a positive thing, obviously. And Adam Thielen really pointed to the fact that a full offseason with OTAs, voluntary workouts, mandatory minicamp has really helped Bryce Young tremendously in this system, because not only were they ill-equipped last year to be successful with a rookie quarterback, the fact that he had to do everything that rookies go through in their first year, all the extra attention, all the extra responsibilities that they have to get to outside of just playing football, it is a lot. And once you get to playing football and you're not really supported as you should be, it makes that year a lot longer. You obviously have to play a lot more games, and how that takes a toll on your body, the mental wear and tear of not being very good at all. It really takes a toll on a young guy, especially when they're looked upon to be the leader. And now with a full offseason under his belt, Adam Thielen has already seen a brand new Bryce Young, as he describes it, throughout 2024 and this offseason. So it poses the question, what was it? What was really missing from the team last year? Was it the system by Frank Reich? Was it more on Bryce? And maybe he isn't number one pick material, because that isn't out of the question. We've seen a lot of number one picks not be the guy for their organizations. But some people will point to Reich, some people will point to Bryce Young. But again, to me, like I started this segment, it really just comes down to the fact that they were ill-prepared. They didn't do enough to bring in Bryce Young as the number one overall pick, and to bring him into a situation where he could truly be supported and where he isn't required to do too much. And I know that's almost an oxymoron. When you're the number one pick, you're supposed to change organizations, right? Especially as a quarterback. But it really depends so much more on the team than a lot of people really want to give the quarterback, the organization, credit for. Night and day situations from what you see in Bryce Young last year to what you see in Caleb Williams this year. That is the epitome of doing things the right way, checking all the boxes before you bring in a guy that's never played in the NFL before, has to get all his life in check, really, with now this being his full-time job, really figuring out everything, his routine, his game day stuff, and just performing out there on the field with all the expectations, being the number one overall pick. All of that to just focus on football, and you take away all the other problems that he could have, not having a number one receiver, the O-line being not as strong. You take all that away and you address it already as he walks in through the door. That's the way to do it, and I think the Carolina Panthers, again, were lacking the personnel on offense to make that a reality for Bryce Young. And Thielen, again, I want to touch on him. He was great, but he can't be your number one wide receiver, especially if you're a rookie quarterback. It won't be pretty yet, but obviously this year with a better offense, it'll at least look better. There's definitely going to be some ugly parts in there, some more growing pains, but I think it will be a better product out there, a better offensive line. Bryce Young having another year under his belt. Deontay Johnson might not be the most in-stone, bona fide wide receiver one, but he is an upgrade over what they had last year. Adam Thielen will still be there, now in a more reduced role as he should have been throughout this entire time with the Panthers. It's going to look a little bit better, and that's all you could really ask for, especially with Dave Canales being a first-time head coach. How is he going to transition into that role? How successful will he be as a leader and leading a young quarterback and a young offense, especially with him being so young as well? How do they maneuver all of that? And a lot of people forget, and I'll just say this to close out this segment, they traded the first overall pick this year for Bryce Young last year to move up in that trade with the Chicago Bears. So it almost adds a little bit more pressure for the Panthers to want to get this right, to sort of validate that move that they made to invest in Bryce Young, because giving up a first-round pick next year, of course you didn't want it to be the first overall pick, you didn't want to be bad, but that was a possibility with drafting a rookie quarterback, and knowing that you're ill-prepared, you should have known that that could have been a possibility. And now that you just gave away the first-round pick to the Chicago Bears this year, and how well they're doing already in the preparation for Caleb Williams and making sure he has all the help he needs, it adds a little bit more incentive and a little bit more pressure, I think, that the Panthers need to make sure they get this right, because it's going to look very bad if they traded that first-round pick in the start of 2023 and Caleb Williams goes on to be this great quarterback. And how did the Bears even get him? It was because the Panthers gave away a first-round pick. They didn't do a good job of developing Bryce Young, and they're still not as well or not as good as we would have thought they would have been with having Bryce Young as their quarterback. They could avoid all of that by just keeping to this plan, not changing their offense or not their offensive coordinator, their head coach too much, sticking with Dave Canales, seeing this whole project, pan out and work itself out. I think it's the best way to go. It's going to be hard. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but with Bryce Young, I still am holding out confidence that he will get the job done and will be a success for the Carolina Panthers. They're on the right path at least now. Hopefully they execute in 2024. But that'll wrap it up for that segment. We're going to go to another break, and when we return, some more revelations coming in the kickoff game, more on Justin Reid taking a bigger role in that field and how taking a bigger role in that field could potentially extend his career a few more years once he's not the top caliber safety in the NFL. What do I mean by that? Stay tuned to find out more on what Justin Reid said about it and my thoughts on the kickoff game revolutionizing the NFL. We'll be right back in just a few seconds.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk some more about the kickoff game. There's obviously going to be some new rules coming this year, a whole new format around the kickoff game. The NFL trying to make it more relevant and how it affects the outcomes of these games. And with that, we previously talked about Kansas City's special teams coordinator bringing up the idea that kickers and covering kickoffs, going out there to try and tackle returners doesn't really match up well, doesn't really end up too well for kickers, the traditional kickers that we see now. So that was a problem that he brought up and something that they were trying to work around. But lucky for them, they have one of the greatest weapons that they could use to try and nullify this problem heading into 2024, and that is their starting safety, Justin Reid. Justin Reid right now is penciled in to take the kickoffs for the Kansas City Chiefs, and we talked about it, how that it's just the ultimate weapon, the ultimate X factor to try and have no issues really covering kickoffs, because now you have a guy out there that tackles guys for a living, is used to taking in that force, going out there to tackle guys anyway. You don't have Harrison Butker, who is, I don't know how old, mid-30s, late 30s. You don't want him out there tackling guys on a regular basis, especially because afterwards he has to go out there and kick field goals and really affect the game that way, potentially win the game that way. You don't want him trotting out there sore or with a limp or anything like that. It really nullifies that problem when you have a guy in Justin Reid to solve that issue for you. And everyone saw Reid step in last year, obviously, for Harrison Butker while he was injured. And, he didn't do too bad. He went out there, kicked some extra points. I want to say he kicked a field goal. It wasn't too long, but I'm pretty sure he kicked a field goal in that game that he did step in for Harrison Butker. And it is better to have him out there, obviously, tackling-wise, on coverages for kickoffs than it is Butker, especially like I mentioned, if Butker has to go out there and kick a 50-something yard field goal, a potential game-winning field goal, or just something like that, you can't have him run the risk of being hurt, having a sore, just body in general by tackling out there if you're not used to doing it throughout your entire career and you just start to do it now. It doesn't really work out well, and that's a problem that the NFL, or not the NFL, but just teams have to work around. I think it makes it more fun. You get creative solutions like you do now, and Justin Reid talked about it a little bit more in a media availability that he had last week, and he said, "We're in a great place with it. although I know he can make some tackles, I think he's excited to preserve himself, and we can use him where we really need him, which is those fourth quarter situations to go nail a 60-yard field goal and win the game. He also acknowledged the fear of having Harrison Butker out there all bruised and sore and obviously unable to do the main job of his point like I mentioned before. So it seems like everyone is on the same page, and what's interesting about this, we talked about that part that I just mentioned before and how great of a weapon it's going to be for the Chiefs, but Justin Reid brought up another interesting point that made me think a little bit further about this topic when he said, "We might have added some time to my career. You might have extended my show a couple of years. When I'm done being the starting guy on safety, I can turn into that rotational third safety and also be a kickoff specialist later in my career." And that's just yet another reason why this new kickoff format is so great for everyone, really. It just creates more opportunities for just anybody to exceed on special teams now, making it more relevant. Having a great kickoff unit that's good in coverage, that's good at blocking, be so important to the game of football. It adds another dimension to it. It's going to be more exciting with kickoffs. Who doesn't love seeing a kickoff? If they could average a kickoff for however many games they play on a Sunday, if they could average maybe 2 to 3 might be a little bit high, but at least 2 each Sunday or each week, it makes the week so much more exciting when you see that happening. And maybe it's a little bit more. I don't know how it's all going to look. I'm still a little bit pessimistic about it, but I think 2 every Sunday of the regular season, which I think is a very likely thing to happen, I think will make this so much more exciting, and it just creates more opportunities like this to me because it makes you almost think with kickers now. It makes me think of a question of this new trend. Are we going to see more kickers be able to tackle, or are we going to see more guys like Justin Reid transitioning into learning more kicking skills rather than the other way around, like I mentioned, with kickers trying to learn some more tackling skills, if that makes sense, right? Are we going to see a guy like Chris Boswell? Are we going to see a guy like Chris Boswell develop those tackling skills at the point of where he is in his career, or are we going to see more guys like Justin Reid, guys that play football already, tackle, make plays on offense or on defense? Are they going to learn some now kicking skills to be more of an asset that way in the kickoff game? I think we're going to start seeing probably some more bigger, stronger kickers. It's going to look a lot different now. We're going to see some more jacked kickers out there, I think, because in my opinion, it's harder to learn the kicking technique, how you kick a ball, how you punt one off, how you kick it off, how you kick a field goal. It's harder to learn those skills, and that really requires more practice, I believe, than trying to learn the tackling aspects of it, trying to learn how to measure angles, how to run at kickers the right way, how to measure somebody up, where to hit them, those sort of things. I think kicking the football and knowing how to kick it accurately at a high level of efficiency, I think will take a lot longer, years to develop kicking a football, because it isn't like obviously kicking a soccer ball or anything like that. It has its own weird shape and all its weird dynamics. You have to really be comfortable with doing that, and that way I think we're going to see more of a trend where we're going to see bigger kickers, stronger kickers. You're not going to see guys, no shade towards the Justin Tuckers, towards the Chris Boswells, towards the Evan McPherson's, Robbie Gould when he played. Those sort of kickers where may not be the most athletic looking, but who knows? Maybe they could be good tacklers, but they don't look the part, right? We're going to see more kickers look the part, in my opinion. I think Justin Reid has sort of started this trend now with this comment that he made about extending his career that I've never really heard of before with the new kickoff format, so that's exciting. While he might be in his own category in terms of a safety, a guy that can already tackle other opposing players and still go out there and kick probably a 30, 40-yard field goal, I think that's more of an anomaly. I think we're just going to see more kickers, more athletic kickers going out there and making tackles, acknowledging the fact that, hey, if I want to be efficient and I want to be out there on the field, I'm going to have to learn to tackle. So they're going to get in the weight room a little bit more, get a little bigger, just look the part a little bit more, still be great kickers. They're just going to look like absolute beasts out there. And I'm excited to see it. It's going to be funny if a kicker absolutely levels another guy on kickoffs to make the tackle. It's going to bring more excitement to it. I love the new kickoff rule. It's probably the most exciting thing, the most exciting change I've seen come to football in a while. I think a lot of people are going to love it. The kickoff game is back. It's going to be relevant. It's going to be great this year in 2024. I'm very excited to see it, and I hope you guys are as well. Let me know what you guys think of Justin Reed's comments and the idea of more NFL players learning kicking, techniques, or more kickers learning tackling techniques. Which one do you think is more likely? Leave that in the comments section during this video or afterwards as well. But with that being said, we're going to get to one more topic after the break. A.J. Brown, seeing all the success of tight end university, seeing how popular it gets and how much better they're getting in the tight end department, he wants to have his own wide receiver university. What did he say about it? What could come of this if this were to become a reality? How many other position groups could join in? I'm going to delve into that once we return in just a few seconds. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show to talk more about a bit more of a fun topic here. A.J. Brown wants a wide receiver university in the NFL. To give some context, I'm sure we already know of the tight end university that has been very popular since starting in 2021 by George Kittle, by Travis Kelce, and Greg Olsen, with the goal to bring tight ends together to just get better, learn from each other, and create this sort of brothership, this bond between tight ends everywhere in the NFL. It is good fun to see when they all get together. I'm sure you guys see clips of it everywhere on social media. And now they're getting a lot bigger. It is growing. It is good to see, I think. Since 2021 and where it is right now, they're having all these, it seems like, events outside of just on-the-field things. It just started with on-the-field things, but now they got more, sponsors coming in, more eyeballs on it, growing it a little bit more than just learning off of each other. I think it really benefits them in all aspects of being a professional athlete and maybe things outside of playing football. So this year's edition has just been, has just passed, has been very successful like it always has been, just growing more and more each year. And now A.J. Brown has seen this. He wants the same for wide receivers. Maybe he's a little bit jealous of it. Nothing wrong with that, but he has seen it, and he took to he took to Twitter to tweet out to all the wide receivers out there last week and to sort of call them out, tell them that they should get something going like this, because he said in his tweet, "Wideouts, what's up? The tight ends got together for a weekend. The DBs link up. The pass rushers even get together. Come on, guys. We can't be too big time to link up and learn. I'm a fan of everyone and willing to work with whoever. Let's make it happen, wideouts." Tyreek Hill was one of the wide receivers that saw this, and he responded with a "let's go, bro." Des Bryant also responded, willing to join in and drop some jewels, as he put it in his tweet, give some guys some knowledge from one of the more successful receivers in the last decade of the NFL. So he is willing to get involved. And I believe just off of the fact of that, throwing this idea out there into the universe, I think it's not long before now we see a wide receiver university, a running back university, a quarterback university. The idea of player empowerment, this idea of players versus the league versus the owners, I think is growing just based off of the fact of the 18-game regular season that we started this entire episode off of. The idea of more player power coming from college, where players now have the NIL deals, they're working things out for themselves, they're working out endeavors outside of the game of football and just taking on more responsibility that way for not only their careers, but just them as a person, as a professional, now coming into the league and trying this out as the idea of getting together, creating more of a bond with these sort of things like wide receiver university, tight end university. I think it's only a matter of time before everybody starts getting together in their position groups, just coming together more and more often when they have to deal with situations like a new CBA, NFLPA situations, 18 games regular season, growing the game internationally more. I think we're going to see them drift now more into these groups where they look upon to each other a lot more for help, for support. And this is a fun way of doing it. I think it's only the start of it. Like I mentioned, I think there's going to be a wide receiver university like A.J. Brown has hinted to. I think it's a great thing. And it makes me think of those older players like you see in all sports, in the NFL and in the NBA more often, where they're not probably the biggest fans of this because it almost seems like you're being friends with your opponents. You know, that's always the biggest thing. Players, the veteran players, the old retired guys might think, oh, like, we never did this in my day. This was never, I would have never gone together with this guy off the field because they're the enemy. You know, we have to keep it as a competition. This isn't something that is good for sports. I think that is drifting more and more away from the truth and how the NFL players and how the current athletes see it now in the current days, because with player empowerment, with the situations like I mentioned before, it's going to help push these players more and more together, growing off of each other, supporting each other. I think that's going to be a reality in the entire thing, whether they call it whatever they wanted to call it. More and more, we're going to see players come together and form these little things that will support each other on the field as well as with things off of the field as well. And on the topic of the older retired players, the veteran players not really liking this, the idea of the NFL being more soft, as some fans, some analysts would like to say, how it has shifted more to be more offensive oriented and pushes, I think, the way that the NFL has been going, like I mentioned, with being more offensive oriented, with being more soft, adjusting the rules to benefit the quarterbacks or the offense, however you want to say it. Trending in that way, while it might push the idea of wanting to be safe, it also pushes for a friendlier atmosphere, I believe, because now, rather than seeing all the dangerous, tough, nasty, grueling defensive games that we see, guys getting hit in the mouth, guys getting pushed, there's no more taunting, there's no more trash talking. You have to watch what you say, watch what you do. You can't be too much over the top. Pushing that agenda a little bit more, it might push for a cleaner image, a cleaner aspect of it, but you're also pushing it to be a bit more friendly. You know, guys aren't in each other's face. They're not celebrating in the opponent's face, really getting under their skin. If some guy comes over the middle and hits you in your mouth, hits you in your chest, you're obviously not going to like it. You're not going to feel good about it either. You're going to get up, you're going to start some trash talk, and it starts to become, you don't want it to be personal, but it almost starts trending and being more aggressive, more nasty. And that way, the older players, like you see in the olden days, I shouldn't say olden days. That was out of line. That was out of pocket. But you know what I mean. In the old, the years back to the 2000s with the Ravens and the 2010s even a little bit, they were all about that, you know, getting in each other's face, talking, being intimidating outside of just playing the game of football. You don't really see that agenda being pushed now. The NFL is pushing away from it. And that's another reason why it is starting to become friendlier. With these guys being friends now, you get the wide receiver universities, the tight end universities, and stuff like that. That is all being pushed now with the agenda that the NFL wants to push for a safer game. You don't get those nasty rivalries anymore. And whether you like it or not, I really don't mind it. I still think, not to say that rivalries are completely out of the game, but it isn't the same. I think most people would agree with that. And, you know, I think it's just the reality of it. With the nature of the game, trying to take the violence, the nastiness out of football. You're going to get, friendlier games, friendlier atmospheres with guys that want to go out there and see each other score, want to see each other have fun. It's all nice, and it is all smiling and laughing and stuff like that. It is just what it is right now. I think we're going to get, I expect there to be a wide receiver university, but where this is all trending towards, it is just going right along the lines of the NFL pushing for a safer game, a friendlier game, a high-scoring game where nobody gets hurt, nobody's upset, there's no malicious intent. Not that there was before, but you get where I'm going with all of that. Them pushing that agenda, you're going to see more of this, more of the players coming together with the 18-game regular season situation, the new CBA trying to look out for each other now, pushing each other closer and closer. That's more of where the NFL is trending right now based on all the decisions that they make with more games, pushing a safer game, a safer football game to the fans. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't really mind it, but I would love to know what you guys think about it. Is this the way the NFL should continue to trend? Do you want it to be a bit more personal, a bit more nasty out there, where these guys aren't friends, where these guys aren't looking to hang out with each other in the offseason, learn off of each other in the offseason? Would you rather see that, or would you rather see right now where everyone is getting together in the offseason and they're all pretty much friends, as it seems like, with A.J. Brown pushing this new idea in wide receiver university? I don't mind it too much, but let me know what you guys think about that in the comments section after this episode, because that wraps it up for today's show. I want to thank you guys all for joining me on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as checking out the network on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for additional content. And also, if you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel on YouTube for more NFL content in various different forms on those YouTube channels. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more conversations and discussions around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys again for joining me, and I'll see you guys back here again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that